Baker. I'm the Program Operations Director at Texas CASA. I want to talk to you a little bit about resilience. So one of the important things to consider when we're thinking about making plans for retention of volunteers is resilience. That elusive quality that keeps people coming back again and again. By definition, resilience is the ability to adapt well to adversity or significant stressors. It's the ability to bounce back from difficult circumstance. We know if a big thing happens, a car accident, that's stressful. I am stressed. That's an acute stress. But some stress can be cumulative. It can go over time, it's ongoing, it's chronic, and then it's much more difficult to identify the stress that we feel until someone maybe is at the end of their rope and they're just done, and then it's too late. We know by its nature this is stressful work that we do as CASA. It takes an emotional toll on us. In this field, we've often referred to it as compassion fatigue, or secondary or vicarious trauma, or burnout. How do we deal with that emotional weight? How do we cope with that? And most of the coping has really focused on our personal coping. So what we do as individuals to cope with stress in our life. The first element of resilience is that self-awareness and insight. So do I know that I'm stressed? Can I make those connections? Am I aware of my strengths and weaknesses? Am I aware of my limitations? Am I working within that knowledge? What are the limits of my control? So for CASA, that's particularly important because we're not the ultimate decision makers for the children we serve. It's our job to know that child, to understand what's in their best interest, to advocate for them, to make those recommendations. And then the decision is out of our hands that comes from the court. That brings us to our second element of resilience, which is a sense of hope and optimism. So do I believe a good thing is going to happen for these children? Do I believe and expect good, positive outcomes? What do I believe? I practice gratitude because I know that has an influence on me. So before my foot hits the floor in the morning, before I'm even out of bed, I think about something I'm grateful for. And that's one of my coping techniques. And that's different for everyone. That's our third element of resilience, is healthy coping. What do we do in our life to have healthy coping techniques? How are we starting our day? So some of the research suggests a work trance. Shows that if you spend the first 2 to 3 minutes of your day focusing on something positive that motivates you, that inspires you, it can influence how your whole day goes. Or if you take just a few 5-minute breaks and you practice some relaxation, where you deliberately relax all the way down from head to toe, or you do some deep breathing, that can influence your day as well and really help with some of that stress you might be feeling. We don't always have that insight and that self-awareness to know that we're stressed or to necessarily have come up with some great coping techniques, and so the people in our lives can be very helpful to us in that way as well. So that brings us to our fourth element of resilience, which is strong relationships. And as CASA staff, we really have an opportunity to develop that relationship with our volunteer. And I'm not talking about checking in with them to see if they're turning their timesheet in on time. I'm talking about, I know this person. I know their birthday, their anniversary date. I know when their grandbaby's due, when their child goes off to college, when they've started a new job. I know they love kittens, and if I'm out and about and I see something that reminds me of them, I'm going to get that for them. because I want them to know I'm thinking about them, that I care about them as a person, not just the function and tasks they do for CASA. That kind of strong relationship gives us influence, and we really know that person. So when they sit down and they say, man, I'm really tired lately, I'm not sleeping well, our first thought isn't lumpy pillow, husband that snores. Our first thought is, I wonder if that's their CASA case. And so we ask them, what are you thinking about when you're awake at night? And we try to help them make those connections. So people will stay in a job, or they'll stay with a volunteer experience because there's people there they care about, because they're cared about. They'll stay for the people. My son, not too long ago, was going upstairs, bounding upstairs with a plate of food in one hand and a drink in the other. And of course, there was a misstep and an accident and everything went flying. And after I cleaned it all up, I said to him, you know, Jax, maybe a better idea when we're carrying food and drink to walk up the steps instead of run up the steps. And he said to me, he said, Mom, it's not a mistake if you learn from it. And I love that. I believe that, and he knows that at 17 years old. One of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And he was a Holocaust survivor. So if everyone could even imagine, that's stripping everything away from you, even your name. There's nothing left in that kind of suffering. And here's what he writes about that. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. So I am always free to choose what I believe, how I respond. In circumstances where I have been treated inhumanely, I can choose to remain human. He also says, and I think about this especially with the children that we work with, human potential at its best always allows for turning suffering into human achievement and accomplishment, and deriving from guilt the opportunity to change oneself for the better. I believe that. What do you believe? And the answer to that question might influence your resilience. So I encourage you to think about, is this work taking an emotional toll on me? Does that cause me stress? If so, how do I deal with that? How do I build these elements of resilience in my life so that we can keep seeing you do the work that you love to do for many years to come?
Welcome to Section 7, Preventing and Responding to Compassion Fatigue and Secondary Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. So how will you talk about compassion fatigue, exposure to trauma, and secondary PTSD with your advocates? You're going to do it at the beginning, at the end, and all the way through the relationship. The work starts with us in keeping ourselves well.
Then we work to prevent harm to our volunteers and help them recognize these possible responses to the work. Speaking from the heart about one's own experience of secondary PTSD or history of trauma allows volunteers to open up and be truthful. Over the long term, as a community, we transform traumatic material into storytelling, connection, and strength. We have one more acronym for you, the most simple one of all, ABC. Awareness, balance, connection. These are tools for prevention. A. Awareness. Spend time developing deeper awareness of your own feelings and limits. Become aware of the signs of compassion fatigue in your own mind and body. B. Balance. Nurture yourself and look for pleasure, joy, and gratitude. Attend to self-care, health, emotions, time away, and maintaining hope. C. connection, increase opportunities for peer support, processing, and celebration. Pair volunteers up so that no one is isolated with their own feelings.
Then it's time to look at creating an organizational culture that reduces compassion fatigue. It would be strange not to have some kind of reaction to the situations that can be so deeply sad. Coach, you might be the first one to recognize when your advocate needs a break. When a person is in a trauma response, their normal systems of resilience aren't working. If their trauma response gets to a certain level, their creativity and their intuition and their ability to express themselves might be hard to find. This is about retaining your volunteers. Feelings of shame and inadequacy associated with feeling compassion fatigue might cause your volunteer to flee. But if you support your volunteer in openly processing their hard feelings, there's a much greater chance that they're going to stay. Here's a list to share with them about what it looks like when trauma exposure ramps up and our wellness is compromised. Might be signs that the advocate might need to go on leave. If they suggest that they're having a personal emergency, follow their lead. Tell them to take a break. Call and ask them in 2 weeks whether you should get another volunteer on this case or whether they're feeling all right to come back soon. Remind them that their wellness comes first. When advocates come in to CASA, they're coming in to change the world. Sometimes it can be really hard to learn where their role begins and ends. Let's look at another scenario.
She's been sexually abused by every man in her household. Her mom is in jail. She does not have anyone else but me. I have to take care of her. I have to answer her calls in the middle of the night because something bad could happen to her.
You are so smart to ask me for an appointment. Your instincts are great. First, I just want to observe that you might be having some trauma exposure reactions, given how upsetting Angel's situation is. Did you get a chance to read that material that I gave you a couple months ago about secondary PTSD?
Oh my gosh. I really haven't had time because I am looking and trying to take care of Angel. I'm sure I might be feeling a little tired or something like that, but it's nothing compared to the PTSD that she's suffering.
I hear that. This is a hard situation. You are really putting your whole self into it. I mean, you might say that you're putting your whole life into it. And I just want to make sure that's not having an impact on you. Everyone's well-being is important. Angel's well-being is important, and yours.
Well, I can't sleep. And I just really want to make things better.
That's a symptom of secondary PTSD. I mean, I think you're actually having a reaction that's serious. Just imagine yourself in her place right now. So imagine you're the kid, and you're saying to your advocate, I can't sleep. I really have to take care of my mom, and no one else is going to do it. It's all me. I am crying every day, and I can't even eat. I can't really go to school. This is taking over my life, but my mom's really important. What would you say to that kid? Would you want to help them get resources?
I would. the thing that I would want for, Angel is not to worry as much, to be able to sleep at night.
That's what I want for you. And about Angel, how we talked about the difference between finding a solution and being a solution. You're only one person, but you can help Angel get connected to a whole circle of people. You've got one little seed that you're planting with Angel. This is her seed of resilience and love and ability to take care of herself. So you planted that, and now you gotta water it. So you're carrying water through the desert to water this one little seedling, and you can't bring the whole river. You bring the whole river, you're gonna knock the seedling over, and all the water will evaporate really quickly because there's a whole desert. But if you pour your one bucket of water on the seedling and you make that relationship safe and it has good boundaries because you have mulched it, then the water is gonna stay there and get to the roots of the tree. When we think of Angel, we'll think of her sitting under this big, beautiful tree. Now let's talk about your self-care. Let's make a list together of things that make you feel peace and comfort and joy and let you rest. Because after this case, I want you to take a month off for self-care and joy. This is not a punishment. This is a vacation. All right?
Sounds good.
When it comes to PTSD, trauma exposure, and compassion fatigue, the subject is first for the coach to learn about protection and healing for themselves. Then it's for the coach to teach the advocate about self-care and protection. And then, when it's appropriate, the advocate can teach the child about self-care and trauma.
In this work, wellness is number one. There is no better investment of time.